justice, not to punish them. The different cases between Rwanda and South Africa. I'm too tired to explain the differences between retributive justice and restitutive justice. But definitely, when I think about it, I'm not thinking about punishment. I'm thinking about exposing a crime in order to prevent it from being committed again, and in order to bring a closure. I have a different point of view nowadays about the crimes that are being committed now. I mean, I do endorse those human rights organizations that try to at least stop Israeli generals who are involved in daily oppression of the Palestinians for visiting Canada, America, or the UK, because they have committed clear-cut crime, war crimes. Because I think these are people who are doing it today, and that's a different mechanism that should be applied here. But for the big crime, if you want, 1948, it's very much like the big crime of apartheid. I think the idea is really not to bring people in order to punish them, but in order to let them be part of something which reconstructs, that allows us to reconstruct the past in order to build a different future.
My name is Cherry O'Reilly, and I grew up in Ireland certain years ago. And I noticed after reading the history that the history of the Irish people was very similar to the history of the Palestinian people. And I've always had a great sympathy for the Palestinian people and for the Jewish people being history as well. And you're aware of the peace process in the north of Ireland. And we have peace there after 800 years of occupation and dispossession. And the rights of the Irish people have been recognized. When I was growing up, I did start reading on the history of the world in general, and I looked around at other situations. And I noticed that the French in Algeria, for example, were very similar. They were a colonial settler state. The north of Ireland was a colonial settler state. The South Africa was a colonial settler state, and so was Israel. And my question for you is, how do you see the end game in Algeria? The French had to leave and go back to France. In the case of South Africa, the whites were accepted as being part of Africa. In the case of Ireland, the loyalist settlers were given the right to have their state subject to the majority, to making a decision in the future. So the question has been asked probably already, but how do you see the end game happening?
Yes, I think there are many parallels in these historical examples that you've said, and of course different solutions were suggested in different places, and not all of them are relevant to the case of Israel and Palestine. I think there are two avenues, if you want, towards the end game. And I'm relating to two out of more, I think, but many others, but two which come, I think, out from what you have brought to the fore. One is an end to an Israeli dream of being part of Europe. It's a very strong sentiment in Israel. The Israelis have a dream of a huge earthquake that would, shake Israel and append it, hopefully, to Italy. They like the food, they like the weather, they like the football there as well. And they know that despite of global warming, this will not happen. So they're stuck in the Middle East, which they don't like. And they will have to change their attitude. This, unfortunately, is also true about 50% of the Israelis who are Arab Jews, and Jews who came from Arab countries. So this idea that in some of the white communities in South Africa is now developing, that you are part of that history and you should show a willingness to be part of that history rather than being an alien fortress in that society, is one way of getting to the end game. The second one is something that I don't know how to do. It's very clear that the present political situation benefits a lot of Jews in Israel, economically, politically, however you want to put it. I mean, I belong to that privileged group in Israel. We live good life. Many of us have a very good standard of living. We have a very vibrant and open society in many ways, apart from the issue of the Palestinians. And it's very difficult to convince people that this should be replaced by something else, in which they would understand that the good life that they have, the expense, and is the price for having that, is the oppression, the continued oppression, occupation, and destruction of the Palestinian people. How do you do that? If you look at South Africa and Northern Ireland, I think education is important. Realization by political factors that they are not going to win for the continuation of the situation. And therefore, I think what we're still lacking in the case of Palestine is an overall strategy. And I won't go again into details why we don't have it. But we, at least in the West, we should create the same kind of coalition that informed the anti-apartheid movement, where people knew what their role was. Nobody in the solidarity movement in Europe thought of replacing the ANC. But because we don't have an ANC in the case of Palestine, it's very difficult to define exactly what role each component takes in it. What is the role of the Jews if people accept the vision of one state and not two nation states? What is the vision? What is the role of Jews in this? What is the role of Israelis in it? These are all questions I have no answer for you. You asked me to chart an endgame which we are just now beginning to propagate as a possible solution. So I think a lot of work has to be done in this respect.
Well, hello, I would like to thank you for your presentation, and I would like to say that I feel for Palestinian people, and I'm always puzzled by that human beings never learn. That I am amazed that Israel, a nation which went through Holocaust, they never learned. I mean, we never learned in the evolution, but you compare Tibet to Palestine a few times, some people here, and I think that I don't know if this is a question or comment, but I would like to say that maybe one of the reasons why Western media and Western society is a little bit confused about this society, by this whole problem, is that I haven't really heard about Tibetan monks dropping bombs and on himself and killing 20 innocent people. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Yes, I don't think that the reason that people have no sympathy for the Palestinians have to do with suicide bombers. If your theory would have been right, then you would have to explain to us why the Palestinians never were granted any sympathy from the West long before the suicide bombers appeared. You know, the suicide bombers appear after decades of Western public opinion just ignoring them. And that's a difference. That's a big difference. I'll give you one example, which is very important. Talk about learning from history. One very important historical lesson to learn from the Palestinians is the following. Between 1967 and 1987, the people of the occupied, oppressed West Bank did not revolt. They were hoping that something better would come, despite a very cruel military oppression. It took them 20 years. And when they started the uprising, they did it with stones and not with suicide bombs. And what did the Israelis do? They used all the military might to crush them. So I'm not justifying suicide bombs. I'm against suicide bombs, and I don't condone it. But I think, again, the historian in me would like to see the long stretch of the way Palestinian violence eventually develops as a possible means of a resistance movement. And I'm not an expert on Tibet, but I have some doubts about your idealistic description of the Tibetan monks, but this is for another lecture. As I said, I have enough fronts. I don't want to start that as well. Okay, we'll leave it at that.